Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Mark Milley, is reported by Bob Woodward and Robert Costa in their new book. I think it's titled Peril. And by the way, this is out to be sold. So, of course, this is marketing for the book and definitely something to keep in mind. And also, historically, Bob Woodward does have access to, high-ranking government officials. However, high-ranking government officials say self-serving things. And so sometimes his stories, while interesting, may not be entirely truthful or just, from one perspective. And just to keep in mind that whoever told Bob Woodward this story had a political motive for doing so. But the reaction to this story, including from Mark Milley himself, doesn't suggest to me that this is entirely untrue and definitely worth breaking down and examining. And so, what Woodward and Costa write is that Milley talked to the highest ranking Chinese general, which he is like the highest ranking U.S. military officer, and as chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, a consultant to the president on military orders. And so that's Li Zhaoqing is the Chinese general he talked to. And it's reported that it happened just before and after the 2020 election, which just before could mean a month or a week or a day, but I'm guessing it's probably in the weeks category, so probably late October, mid-November, he's making calls to this Chinese general. And it's, being portrayed as because Trump was being so reckless, Milley called these generals to say that he would alert China if the U.S. was going to come up with Trump was planning to attack China. And I guess he never actually made that alert, and so maybe his fear that Trump was going to attack China was a little bit overblown. It's not exactly clear, and again, the whole book isn't out yet, that this is all the details to this and exactly how it happened. But, the reaction to this story has gotten him condemned from a lot of people, and not just Fox News, even Alexander Vindman, who, we talked about on this show as being kind of a rat and not really, somebody to be trusted, but definitely a deep state actor. And he criticized Milley for this. And Milley is generally liked by, the U.S. establishment. And so, from inside the military, this is not me inside the military, but the at least retired military community. This has drawn some condemnation. And again, of course, Republicans, I guess probably both out of loyalty to Trump and just now scoring political points against this general that seems to be favorable and agreeable towards Biden, as the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. There definitely calls for him to resign and calling him a traitor. Now, there are members of the establishment, including this article that I have from The Atlantic. I don't know if this article goes as far as to call him a hero, but there are people calling him a hero and saying that, this was a very brave thing to do when you have a president as reckless as Trump. And in a way, it's kind of playing on the American respect that we have for our military, that, often if you look at Congress, the Supreme Court, the presidency, and the military is the one with the most credibility and respect from the American people. And so in a way, I think they're kind of playing on that and playing up the whole idea that, we could have congressmen who are or not, excuse me, not congressmen, excuse me, military officers that are more capable than the president and, should override the president from time to time. And I think that's the concern here because, my instinct is always pro peace and even over constitutional frameworks and stuff like that. Now, I think 99% of the time, if we went by the Constitution, that would make America, less likely to go to war, and we probably wouldn't have gotten involved in almost any of the wars that America has gotten into. However, if there was some scenario where Congress was trying to keep the country at war and the president was trying to bring the troops home, I support the president's executive war authorities on that every single time, no doubt in my mind whatsoever. So, I mean, that's kind of just my position on it, to be absolutely clear, because I am going to, give my commentary and say that I don't think that Milley did the right thing here, even though it seems that this is a case where he was looking to ease down tensions between the U.S. and China. And that is a reason that I think connections between U.S. and governments like Iran or Russia or China at different levels is important. However, if Milley was really worried that Trump was so unhinged that he was going to carry out this preemptive attack against China, he really needs to tell the American people that and come out publicly, resign, and in that way, China will know at least the situation from Milley's perspective, and also then get other perspectives too. The Trump himself will be able to respond to this because maybe in a way, if Trump, because he obviously didn't attack China here, this could almost have been an inflationary issue long term between the U.S. and China. If you have General Mark Milley calling and saying, "Oh, at any time Trump could attack," that that could really have, cause China to take different policy actions in the future, maybe more aggressive and hostile against the U.S. even. And so I just think that's something really important to consider. That while in the short term and maybe in that sense, if again Trump was about to do this would have been a way to maybe calm down tensions and was a good thing. But at the same time, if Milley was just inflating the threat that Trump presented, that could actually be an increase of tensions between the U.S. and China. But from my perspective, I think this is the least important of the two stories. The more important one, Ray McGovern does a great job of breaking down in his new article for antiwar.com. Please check it out. It's on the page today. Old soldier Mark Milley should fade away. And this is about the other thing that Mark Milley did, which I believe the date on this is January 8th. He called in all the military commanders one by one. And it's not exactly clear to me what all the military commanders means. Was this just like, the head of CENTCOM, the head of STRATCOM, the head of NORTHCOM, SOUTHCOM, or maybe even lower ranking military personnel, just basically all the generals. But anyways, he called them in one by one to ensure them that they would involve him in the nuclear chain of command. Now, the reason this is important is that as the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and as the highest ranking military member in the United States, it is actually not his role to be involved in that chain of command. And this is explained in the Ray McGovern article by Colonel Douglas McGregor, who I believe was in the administration at this time, saying that nuclear chain of command runs from POTUS to Secretary of Defense. So at the time that would have been Christopher Miller. Now it would be Lloyd Austin. And then to Strategic Command, which is the ones who actually hold the nukes. He says, obviously, there are others that POTUS can consult, but as far as orders are concerned, what above is accurate. POTUS would also have to grant authority for any tactical weapon at sea or in the air. Again, Milley is the senior military advisor to POTUS. He can be consulted, but there is nothing in law that requires his participation. Presumably, that is why he insisted that he be involved. And so this, is insubordination from Mark Milley, and it's inserting himself within the nuclear chain of command. And again, this does seem to be a case that if you just kind of read it on face value, it's very easy to just conclude that, hey, Mark Milley may have done a good thing here because he put another layer between a president and using nuclear weapons by kind of usurping the president's power to use nuclear weapons. Now, the concern is what does this actually mean? If the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff now has, authority over nuclear weapons, can he then use them, aggressively if he feels like the president either is incompetent or not going to? Which, I'm not saying that is Joe Biden's current mental state right now, but let's say since months from now, the guy hasn't spoken in public in 3 months, and everybody's doing this alarmism and fear-mongering about China, or let's say Russia, Iran, or North Korea, or, any other country that we put on the enemy list. And could Mark Milley then, essentially stick himself into the chain of command somewhere and then authorize an attack? And while that isn't something that, we necessarily know is the case right now, as Ray McGovern points out, and he, was involved in the CIA, he briefed the older President Bush, when he was vice president, So he knows how this works. And he says now Putin and Xi have concrete evidence that this kind of insubordination extends to potential nuclear conflict and extends to the very top of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And Mark Milley is seen as a good guy for what he did. But, Putin and Xi, of course, have no guarantee that the current situation isn't going to, usher in who knows who Mark Milley's replacement is, or again, what Mark Milley is going to judge to be the military situation, and in fact, could feel like the president isn't carrying out enough military action. Also, we've seen other times in the past where the U.S. has, or where the military seems to have stuck itself within the chain of command and do things to, circumvent diplomacy trying to be negotiated by the president, such as in 2015 when the Obama administration was trying to work out a deal with Russia, working together against jihadists in Syria. Suddenly, the U.S. Air Force ends up blowing up a Syrian military position and scuttling that whole deal. We could see these kind of things happen. The more that our military sits themselves in this chain of command, the less that we have civilian control over our military, which is extremely important. And again, there are things that Mark Milley could have done here that would have been appropriate, including resigning and telling the American people what the hell was going on, not leaving us to discover 8 months later from a Bob Woodward book in a teaser to try to sell it. If you're really concerned that was going to happen, the American people need to know.